Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here in this live streaming. This is the first time we're doing it this way. So if you're joining us today, we're happy to have you. If not, you can call your friends in, invite everyone. We're here live. We should be live on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and we have a great lineup today. So we will have a great conversation for sure. I'd like to introduce you to my co-hosts today that will be talking about becoming accountable. We have a wonderful, I couldn't hope for a better lineup today than we have today. So first I'd like to introduce you to Mahamoud Dante. Hello, Dante, how are you? Connecting all the way
Hello,
from
Monica.
Mali.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me to join this. I'm joining from Mali. It's 3 p.m. here. Hello, everybody, and I look forward to have a great discussion here. Thank you.
So 3 p.m. in Mali, 9 in Mexico, and we have a bit of a confusion with our time change. So but hopefully we'll have people in here. So if you're watching this live, please send us a little comment so we'll know you're here. And if you're watching it in recording, we'll still leave the comments. We'll be looking into them later on. But we hope if you're here live, you can join in the conversation. So anyway, Dante, I would like to introduce our other people here in the room today. So first, Dante, I don't know if you want to say something about yourself. Dante is a wonderful consultant. He is with Beacon, our partner in Japan, but he is now in Mali. So would you like to just say hello quickly?
Yeah, I would love to do that. I'm Mahamoud Dante. I was born and raised in Mali. Went to Japan 10 years ago, where I did my MBA, graduate university, and joined Beacon, which is the IP owner of the Human Element Global IP, where I work as a consultant, as a trainer, and also do a lot of work in terms of business development. I've been very lucky to be taking care of the global IP of the Human Element, which allows me to work with wonderful people such as Monica Diaz here today. So thank you again, and I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, and folks, it's we have been having these conversations from the human element perspective on different subjects. So join us every Wednesday. We'll be doing this. We're trying, if we like this platform better, we might do it here. We've been doing it on Clubhouse, but join us, share this, and we will be here every Wednesday morning for us, afternoon in Mali, and very late at night in Japan. But we still have our colleagues join us. So if you're here, just leave a comment. We'll acknowledge you in a bit. So, okay, so today we have more people joining in. So I would like to introduce them one by one and have them say a little bit about themselves and just say hello so we can get this party started. So first of all, I'll start with the ladies now, right after Dante has been my partner in crime in these conversations. So we have Pilar Campos joining us from Mexico. She is a human element senior consultant, and she is here today. I'm so happy you could make it, Pilar. Thank you.
Thank you, Moni. How are you? Hello, Dante. So far from us, but so close in this platform.
Yes, very close. And Pilar is in Mexico. She does a lot of consulting work around the globe, but in Mexico, and she also does some some more social work. She has clowns. What do you call that? Right?
It is clown care with
right.
Dr. Payaso called in Mexico.
Exactly.
Patch Adams is her godfather.
Right. So they do all this work with people and clowns, and she heads this organization in Mexico, and she also does human element work, and it's great to see you and be connected in this way with Dante and with everyone. So welcome and thank you. We also have one of my dearest, most trusted colleagues from another part of the world and also from a different perspective, but I love it because she has some great work to add to this conversation about accountability. So today we have Susan Mazza from Florida. Hello, Susan.
Hello. I'm so excited to be with you today. And I live in Vero Beach, Florida. So yeah, like you said, another part of the world. I am the founder and author of the blog Random Acts of Leadership, and the creator of the Leadership in Action system. And really what my focus is on teaching people to access their power, to be and do the remarkable, power coming from the inside out. And how do you, in practical, everyday ways, elevate your leadership? So that's what I do.
Yeah, her multi-awarded blog, Random Acts of Leadership, and it's a wonderful read. So head on over there if you can. And I find that our work with the human element and Susan's work complements itself perfectly. So, and this is becoming accountable is just right down your alley. So I'm glad you're here to chime in. And last but not least, we have my very dear and wonderful Ethan Schutz with us today from New York.
Hello, everyone. Good to be
Hello,
here.
Ethan.
Hello, can you introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, my name is Ethan Schutz. I'm CEO of the Schutz Company. We do a couple of different things. We represent the human element in the US and Canada, and we also work with clients directly at the intersection of strategy and people, helping people actually carry out the strategies that they say they want to. So everything to do with accountability, like we're talking about today. Looking forward to this. Exactly.
So, and I am Monica Diaz. In case you don't know me, I'm from Kidam Global. I do work with transformation in organizations and also with people coaching. And I have created models to do more and more value exchange between people and their organizations in the future of work. So happy to be here today. And Dante, take it away. You always lead us into these conversations. So today we're talking about becoming accountable. So how do you want to start this?
This is, I'm so happy because generally we don't have that much of people with us to carry on the discussion. So I'm very happy today. And again, thank you all for joining. It's very easy to start this because people talk a lot about accountability and they generally have a vague understanding of it. And when we talk about accountability, what exactly are we talking about? Is it about judging somebody? Is it about scolding at somebody, or is it about me taking care of everything in the organization and try to be the most responsible? So with this kind of thing around, I would like to start with like if people have different perspective. When you hear accountability, what are you hearing?
Right, and I'd like to. Well, we're getting greetings from Lauren, from Maria Jesus de Miguel from Madrid. Thank you for joining us. And we have people joining us from the US, from different places. So if you want to chime in, just leave your comment and we'll put it on here. So we're starting with asking about what do you understand when you hear the word accountability? Hello, Marcia. Okay, so let's start. Who wants to chime in? What is accountability to you?
Well, I can give you the definition that we use. So we talk about, in the work that we do, we talk about two things. One is the self-awareness piece, which we call self-responsibility. Am I taking responsibility for the things that I choose to do or not do, or what I say or choose not to say? Accountability then is how I do that with other people. So it includes things such as, do I say what I do I do what I say I'm going to do? Do I give you notice? Do I have the intention of making sure that I am being self-responsible with you and around you? So that's our quick definition of it. I should add, it's not a blaming thing. It's definitely not looking for the guilty party, but rather looking for how I am actually being self-responsible with other people.
Right. Okay, so there you have it. The
Yeah, thank you.
definition for Ethan.
At least for me.
I think that's a great way to look at it. Anyone would like to share any other perspective?
I would like to say, I'm sorry, Susan.
Go ahead, Pilar.
Thank you. It's like taking my personal responsibility. It is not to do the work. But my responsibility, it is even to tell people what I do not agree with them or what they are not doing, like not to avoid a conflict, for example.
Right.
Because,
So
yeah.
showing up is part of my accountability, right? Just being open in the presence of others. Nice. I like that little tidbit.
Yeah.
Susan, you were saying.
Yeah, how I would define accountability is a commitment to making and honoring your promises. And I use the word honoring rather than keeping very specifically because let's face it, we're human beings and we don't keep every promise we make. But I think what happens is sometimes when we fail to deliver on what we promised, there are still ways that we can honor the promise we made. Maybe there's something we have to do to clean it up, right? And on the holding people accountable side, I think if we relate to what holding people to account is all about, is holding them accountable for being and doing their best. So when someone fails to deliver, you want to look at the whole process of from the moment somebody made a promise, have we empowered them to and supported them in being able to actually keep their promises? And when they can't, are we supporting them in finding ways to honor them even when they don't?
All right. I like that.
Yeah. I really like the definitions you have just given. I think you have really covered it very well, from even starting with the self-awareness piece, being aware, of what's in it for me, what's about myself first, and then relating to people around us, and talking about like being open, because the piece of openness is very important about this if you want to be accountable, because as you've just shared, Susan, sometimes we cannot do everything we promise to do to people, but as long as we're open about it, it shows a way for people to understand that this is not a lack of commitment, or it's not something different. The willingness to do is there, but something else got on the way. So thank you very much for your definitions. Monica, anything you would like to add?
I want to add something. And
Yes, please go ahead, Faye.
In my experience with organizations, it happens that they do not share a definition. So what happens when I understand accountability as something so different from your point of view? So I think that's a basic point, like to talk about what does it mean in this organization, accountability.
Yeah, I think not only talking about it in a general perspective, like giving definitions like we are now, but also just having the conversation continuously, how we perceive accountability in our group, in our family, or in our organization, or in our team. How do I want people to show up and become accountable? And how do I become more accountable? For me, I think one of the things that I would add to this conversation is that in honoring those promises, I do have to understand myself and also what gets in the way. So what happens when I have the intention of being accountable for something? I want the buck to stop here and I really want to contribute, but some things get in the way. So this exploration about how does it show up? So for me, for example, how does procrastination show up for me? When does it show up? How does it get in the way of me honoring my commitments to others, and why? So for me, it's a continuous exploration, because that shows up when I'm afraid of something, when I haven't explored what I'm getting into, or when I want to contribute in a different way. And if I can have that conversation. So also for me, honoring the promises are about understanding how I contribute to others and how they contribute to me. And so what I do and what I don't do really factors into this, to this idea of becoming more accountable to myself and to others, right?
Monica, can I add a couple things to this? Because
Yes.
I'd love to build on what everyone is saying. In my mind, the self-awareness part is noticing for myself, what am I doing? So for like your example with procrastination. And Susan, what you're talking about in terms of honoring promises, we often will talk about, what do I do if I know I'm not going to follow through on something that I have committed to or
Right.
told you that I'm going to do? And that, like Pilar, like you're saying with organizations, those are really helpful conversations to talk about. What do we agree to? Almost always, I find that what people want is that if I'm not going to do something, they want me to tell them at the earliest possible opportunity to say, I said I was going to do this. I'm not going to get it done. There are various reasons. I don't make excuses about that, even if it's not something in my control, but I tell you. And then I also tell you what I'm going to do to handle that situation. And I may have a solution and I may not, but if I don't, I say that, and then I work with you to figure out what might work. So let's say I'm going to be late getting some work to you. Then I call you if I say, I know I'm going to be late. I'm not sure how to get it any quicker. Can we talk about what we can do together to solve that? We would call that being accountable, because what I'm doing is taking responsibility for what's going on with you. Right. And I find a lot of the conversations are about those kinds of things. What do we do if? How do you want me to be with you in that situation?
Right. And if we don't factor that in, we become afraid of saying, oh, I'm accountable. This becoming is more difficult because it's imperfect. It's just perfectly human. Even if you're super accountable, there will be times when you need to have these conversations about when you're not going to do what you promised, or you are doing what you promised, but it's not going to get you where you wanted to go. Mm-hmm. And just having these conversations will really make a difference.
I started thinking and listening to both you, Monica, and Ethan, that, accountability is a team sport, right? A lot of times in organizations, where accountability goes awry, if somebody walked in the room and said, who's accountable, people would be hiding under the table because there's like this negative connotation to it, right? And I think from an organization standpoint, what we really want to do is kind of break up that negative connotation, because again, holding people accountable, in my point of view, is about holding them up to being and doing their best, right? And that's when we all succeed. But this conversation that has to happen begins with a request that's made and somebody either accepting or declining the request, right? And it's that negotiation. And if we want to increase the level of accountability in an organization, which includes those honoring when we can't do something we said we were going to do and having the freedom to do that, we've got to really approach our relationships with people when we make commitments, when we make promises, like a handshake. It's not a handoff. I ask you to do something. I'm not like lobbing it over the wall or handing it off and then letting go. There's a partnership here. And me as the person making the request is as responsible for that commitment being followed through on as the person who accepted the request to begin with. Otherwise, those conversations you talked about, those vulnerable conversations of, man, I'm procrastinating because like, I really don't want to do this, or I don't know how to do this. If I don't have that conversation early, I'm likely to just hope it's on my to-do list and nobody ever follows up with me, right? How many things when we look at our to-do list or commitments we've made that we're like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have said yes to that.
Yeah.
And something. Sorry, Monica. No, I think that a very good practice that I have seen many times more each day is to own the mistakes and share them as a learning experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What happens if I'm brave enough to say, I made a mistake? Maybe someone else can learn from it. Like to stop being so judge other people, like to share mistakes is a good practice.
Right. You have the fuck up nights idea where people get together to talk about their biggest blunder. I think it's just great because, I have my coaching clients sometimes do when I find that they're overcommitting and it's cutting into their becoming accountable. Then I say, okay, so now let's create. I know you're really good at doing to-do lists and not getting to everything. So I want you to have a to-don't list. Mm-hmm. So decide early in the morning, this is what I'm not doing today. I'm not going to do these. And that's so hard for them at first, because just saying I won't do that it's kind of counterintuitive, and we don't do it, but we don't do it enough. And when we get to a place where we can have our to don't list, then I know I might have to ask someone for help, or I might have to do it in another way. Then I can become more and more accountable. It feels like I'm trying to be very accountable, so I say yes, and I organize. And I had this one coaching client that had a calendar that was just scary just to look at. If you just saw it, you would say, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to do any of this. This is crazy," right? He had everything to the T, and it was awful to look at. And I said, just put in some to don't time, to really relax and transition, right? And it was so hard for him because his idea of becoming accountable was having a lot of things, important things to do, and committing to them. And he was pretty accountable, but sometimes he dropped the balls because he was human, right? So I think these different perspectives are important, right, Dante?
There's
totally. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dante.
Mm-hmm. No. I'm just following through, and I really like the way you carried it on. I didn't have to bring it in, but the next question I had was, how can we then become more accountable? But I think you have already given a lot of insight for that. If you want to continue saying something,
yeah, I
just
want to build on something that Monica has said, and in the spirit of how can we be more accountable. So I love that to don't list thing. One of the things that I talk with my clients about is the difference between saying yes and choosing yes.
Yeah.
And some of us have a habit of we want to make people happy. We want to say yes to everything, right? But there's a consequence to that, and beginning to see the consequences, then we don't get to things. And sometimes the person that gets left out is we say so many yeses to other people that we don't get to the things that are priorities for us. So one of the things that I struggle with, a lot of my clients struggle with is, how do I keep my promises to me? Because I tend to be the last in the list, right? But this whole idea of saying yes versus choosing yes is saying yes is the easy thing, right? It's easy to say yes, not necessarily easy to follow through with that you said yes. But choosing yes requires that we consider, is what I'm saying yes to a match for what I'm, from what I'm at work on, for my goals, for the goals of my organization, and really choosing, consciously, hesitating for a moment from that reflex to want to say yes and saying, does this make sense? Because if we can't say no, we're not really choosing yes. We're just adding to a very long to-do list, then something's going to break. So,
yeah.
I would add one other thing too, in terms of the question, how do I become more accountable? Because I think the other end of this is, like Susan, you're talking about when we go to hold somebody else accountable. What is that?
Right.
Most people I find are very afraid to do that. It almost always feels like blame. It's like looking for the guilty party and all of the stuff that we go downhill with. So in my mind, and what we talk to people about is, if I'm going to go talk to somebody about something they didn't follow through with, to be accountable means to say what's true for me instead of blaming them. So I might say, I'm wondering where this is, and I'm nervous because I need to get what you're doing in order to finish my job. Let's talk about that, as opposed to coming and saying, you didn't get this to me. Right. So from that point of view, all blame, or for that matter, all defensiveness on my part is not being accountable. Accountable is noticing what happens for me and being open about that without putting it on the other party. I think that also tends to be a way to get a better response from someone else rather than coming and blaming them.
Yeah, Ethan, I mean, you started before, I believe, talking about personal responsibility versus accountability. And I think that gets to the heart of the matter there, because ultimately what I think you're talking about is being personally responsible for, your role in the commitments that were being made, whether you're on the receiving end or the giving end.
Yeah,
right?
Much like you were saying. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So like we're talking about what strategies we have to become more accountable. So we've explored saying no sometimes, and learning how to do that, owning my mistakes, letting people know when I'm not going to honor a commitment or a promise. Having these difficult conversations, being aware of myself, not blaming or not becoming very defensive, because that doesn't help me become more accountable, and it also doesn't help others to show up as accountable. So what other strategies do we have? And I'd also invite, if you're
And maybe, Monica,
Mhm.
it also is be willing to accept criticism. That has to do with openness, that was Ethan talking about.
sure.
But like, use the metacognition process to question your thoughts. Why is this bothering me? What they are telling me, no? That
Right.
has to do
Why am I
also with
reacting to
defensiveness.
this? Yeah.
Exactly.
So, for example, am I feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm really not becoming accountable here. I messed up. What is happening? And maybe owning that will help me to explore different options in the future.
Start pointing inside and stop pointing outside.
Well,
Yeah.
and one fun way to do that is to build on what you were talking about before, Monica, with the to don't list. The other thing you can ask people is, so tell me all the clever ways that you have of avoiding being accountable. Right. So it's like Susan, you were talking about, well, I put it at the bottom of the list and I hope that nobody will see it there. Right? People have amazing strategies that I find they're pretty willing to tell you if you ask them in that way. Like,
Yeah, and you're asking,
we're
you know,
all
a while
experts at
ago.
this, right? We've spent
Yeah.
lifetimes
Yeah.
figuring out how not to be accountable.
Yes.
Let's exchange, our best skills, and off we go.
We got a comment a little while
like
back.
that.
We got a comment from Lauren. She was saying it sounded like endarkment when we were talking about the to don't list.
Definitely.
And this strategy that Ethan is putting forward is also for us human element people. It's endarkenment, just going to the other side. So how do you not show up as accountable?
Yeah.
And exploring that really helps to find new ways, new strategies to become more accountable.
Celebrating what we do badly.
Exactly. We
Fun.
celebrate what we do badly. So hello to Lauren. And we have a comment from a LinkedIn user that I'd like to show up here so we can explore it a bit more. I don't know who it comes from because it's not showing, but it says, but thank you anyway. So the gray area I experience is the gray area between the elements of accountability and the levels of empathy, sympathy, understanding each party has or applies to events that come up. So anything you'd like to speak to that?
I'm not certain I completely understand what they mean, but I'll take a guess. I think that's getting at how do I manage between a rigid understanding of accountability and the feeling that I might have about the person who's struggling with it, perhaps. I suppose it could go either way. And I think sometimes just acknowledging that, like the manager who's firing someone and they feel really bad about it, saying that, this is really hard. I don't want to do this or something to that effect. I think there are times when it makes sense to, give somebody a pass, if you will. But I think being explicit about that and saying why and taking accountability for my own feelings about it is really where that fits for me, if I'm understanding the question. At least that's
I think
When I read this question, what I think about like right away is being clear about who is in charge of what, because we can sympathize, we can feel, sympathy and understanding other like people around us. But if we're not clear about who is in charge of what, then these like empathy, sympathy things can come in and create a big mess. So I would just say it's about clarity about task, about functions, about what needs to be done.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, also what comes up for me, and I think this is a great exploration, whether we're getting it exactly in the gist of what the comment meant, but or not, you can tell us, write it in the comments. So one of the things that shows up for me is when I talk about becoming more accountable or holding people accountable, sometimes people will think that means not showing empathy and understanding, and not being flexible. And showing up as accountable, as we have been exploring today, also includes being vulnerable and being willing to stand up for someone else and help each other and let us know when we're failing. And it doesn't mean that. And in fact, people, when we look at this in interpersonal relations, we like to be held accountable. And we might be afraid of it. We might put it at the end of the list or whatever, but we would love to be held more accountable. And when somebody does it with empathy, with esteem for me,
but also holding me to what I promised and offered, then I become stronger for it. So I think sometimes we misunderstand what empathy would mean. So I might empathize with you. So if somebody, for example, we become really critical of people that do the same things we do sometimes. So instead of becoming more understanding, I'd say, oh, you have to do this on time, exactly like we asked you. And I might become rigid with others, or I might be really flexible because I might have done that. But neither of those is helpful in becoming accountable. In helping the other person to become accountable, or in myself becoming more accountable, because I let things slide, or I become hypercritical, but I don't make the changes necessary to include the empathy and the understanding in my future actions.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, Monica, you have me thinking that, you know, empathy, sympathy, understanding does not mean letting someone off the hook.
Right.
And there is a, you know, whenever, you know, I don't keep a promise that I made, there is a consequence to that. But I am not a bad, you know, shaming and making people wrong and, you know, all of that bad stuff, you know, Ethan, that you pointed to before. That's, you know, that's accountability gone awry.
Yep.
But causing somebody to look at the consequences of their action or inaction so that they can take personal responsibility for the impact that their lack of follow through or delivering on their promise caused, that is understanding, right? But it's not letting somebody off the hook. It's helping them to understand so they can grow and so they can take responsibility and restore their integrity with others. Because I think a lot of what people miss is that if I keep not keeping my promises, my integrity takes a hit every time. And, you know, one of the ways that you can, you know, repair integrity is to make promises and keep them over and over and over again until people start to trust you again, or a person starts to trust you again. But if we just let people off the hook, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I understand the dog ate your homework, you know, whatever it is.
I ask them for less and less until I have to let them go, right? Or I never trust them again. I decide
exactly. So they gotta, you know, like, you know, part of being empathetic is helping them to see the consequence so they can step up and take responsibility. And because being sympathy is not letting people off the hook, I guess is the bottom line of what I hear you're saying, Monica.
Yeah, and I totally agree, and I find that's a common pitfall. And what people don't notice is if I let you off the hook, I'm not being accountable because I haven't said, "Wait a minute, this is what we agreed to."
Because of that handshake thing that Susan
was talking about. Absolutely,
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I think this comment came from Lori Mann. I think Lauren can see the name on LinkedIn, so thank you, Lauren and Lori, for the comment.
And I think it has to do less with words and more with actions. We can talk about it, but if we don't paste actions, it doesn't happen anything different from what has happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. Our conversations need to move us into right action, different action, transformative action.
That's what brings me to the next question I wanted to ask to all of you, because you might be motivated, you might want to be accountable, but sometimes the environment wouldn't promote that. You would be sitting, if I become like accountability, as we have shared here, is about me willing to tell that I had promised to do this, but I'm not able to do this anymore because of A, B, C, D, but I will cover that. Or me being open about how I feel and why I don't want to do something. But if you are in an environment where this kind of comment will lead to a punishment or will lead to a toxic side talk, that wouldn't be, I don't think it would be easy for people to be the way we are talking about, to be accountable. So what can organizations do in order to promote accountability?
Well, my first reaction to that question is that we are always becoming more accountable. It's not something where then all of a sudden you're totally accountable. Yeah.
Yes.
You become more and more accountable, and you find yourself becoming more accountable as you go. So it's a process that we're always in. But I do believe that the way we handle objections in an organization, the way we handle failure or mistakes, and the way we handle excuses, these three are things we need to really consider and work with, because there are some organizations where excuses are acceptable, or some excuses. So I just make sure I use that list instead of other excuses, and I'm fine, right? But they're still excuses. So they still let us off the hook. They still maybe punish somebody else instead of me, but they don't work to make us move into different action. So how do we handle excuses? Do we allow ourselves any? So sometimes I'll say, hey, I've been putting it off, but I have to turn it in today at 4. So if I have to work only on that today, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I won't allow myself that excuse, right? I'll take whatever excuse I'm using. What are my favorite excuses? I ask people to. So what are your favorite excuses, and how do you move beyond them? How can you act differently in the face of those excuses? The other one is how we've talked a little bit about it, how we handle our mistakes and our failures. And does this mean that I'm forever tainted by that mistake? How do we recover from mistakes? How do we handle them in the organization? How do we learn from them as a person and as a group? And of course, how do we talk about accountability? How do we foster becoming more accountable on a day-to-day basis, or on different things? How do we become, so what's the environmental issues that make it difficult? So for one, it's if they're very punitive, right? If there's a lot of criticism, a lot of punitive measures for mistakes, right? But also another one might be if it's very permissive and nobody holds me accountable, and I don't hold myself accountable. That's an awful environment to become accountable in. And then there's also the how many excuses do we allow, and how are we going to combat these excuses so they don't keep showing up?
I would say, Monique, that there are so many things I cannot change in the world. If I have like a magic, like this one,
magic wand,
dun, 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 I would change so many things. But as I grow on, I am 55, I know that I can lead by example. I cannot change the whole organization, but I can change myself.
Right.
So maybe I can be a leader that inspire other people to be accountable by my actions, because I can be aware and question myself and change myself. So it's about choice of changing myself to inspire others.
You know, I think, Dante, you speak to perhaps the number one impediment to high performance, right? Is how an organization deals with, a toxic environment around accountable behavior is going to affect performance. So if you're, way down in the level wise, you're down low on a totem pole, and you're in a toxic environment around accountability, to Pi's point, you can only lead by example. You can only do your best, right? But at some point you have to choose, is this the environment I want to be in? And from a leader's point of view, until, accountability begins with a commitment to high performance. And when there is a sincere commitment to high performance, it becomes glaringly obvious that those kinds of behaviors that we're talking about don't work. But the change must come from the top, because if some people get left off the hook and other people get beat up for failing to deliver, if some excuses are good and other excuses are not good, people learn to play the game, all of those things impede it. So the question I would ask if I was coaching a leader is, how committed are you to high performance?
Yep.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that. I think it has to start at the top. And I note that in any organization, there are some people or some groups that are more accountable than others.
Yes.
So I do think you can start where you are. Pilar, to your point, it's an individual thing. And I think really the key ingredient is being courageous. Am I going to be courageous to try something a little bit different or put myself there? What I notice is that, at least for myself, if I choose to be accountable no matter where I am,
Yes.
it rarely goes wrong. I think the big risk is if I admit a mistake in an environment where mistakes are punished. I think that's the big issue, but getting my stuff done on time rarely results in any punishment.
No.
So if I'm upfront about that, then sometimes people will notice. Right? Or if you have one person who's starting to do that, even if they're not at the top, sometimes, then they're noticed as, oh, they're more effective, or Susan, like you're saying, they're more productive.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so just if you're listening to this live and you want to chime in with any questions, that we're heading towards the last 10 minutes of the conversation. Time flies when you're having fun, guys. I feel like we just started. So the thing is, if you have anything you would like to comment, we would be glad to follow up on it here.
We have a question on the chat, Moni.
Okay,
so a LinkedIn user.
All right, let me see where it is. Do you have it there? Because I can't see it.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that from leadership perspective, the first step of accountability is to communicate the possible consequences of not following up and ensure that person knows the impacts of not honoring their commitment. Is that a fair perspective?
I'd say it's fair, but perhaps incomplete.
Right.
So I'm not sure it's the first step, but I think the first step is really negotiating your agreement. And part of negotiating an effective agreement where there really is a handshake is there needs to be clarity on both parties as to why what's being requested and promised is important and who it's important to. So less about the consequences of not following through, but why it matters, because then the consequences of not following through become pretty obvious.
And people are more purposeful in their.
Then they're more purposeful. If I know, there's a difference between somebody making a request of me and saying, oh yeah, I'll take care of that, and throwing it on my to-do list without any context or understanding of how important it is. And then, the days go by and I forget about it. It drops to the bottom of my list. But if I don't know that somebody's really counting on me for that and why, my level of intentionality and importance that I give to that thing on my list is going to be down. So if I'm making a request of somebody, I need to make sure they understand why this is really important and make sure they're giving me a handshake, not just, taking it and throwing it on their list. So.
Yeah. And I would add to that. I think what's important in what you're saying too, is it's putting it in a positive frame. This is about achieving something, not about getting caught. And I think that's a big mind shift for many organizations, where if there isn't accountability, then the only crime is getting caught, and people will get away with whatever they can. Right. So that positive viewpoint on this, that no, actually we want to do it. We want to be accountable as an organization and as individuals because we have a nicer place to work and we get more done, is essential for a first step, at least in my mind. Yeah. The other part that I find that's missing a lot is really detailing out what does it look like when people behave accountably, a bit like where we started. Like, what does it mean, to follow through? What does that look like? What does it look like if I know I'm not going to? What do I say? How does that happen? What does the other person say? Those things are often not known. People just don't know what to look for, or it's not that they don't have the intention of doing it.
First of all, we try to never do that, right? We try to never do that.
What's that? So I think that's an important piece as well.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you for the question there. And we have a comment from Eva as well, that she just loves to listen. We love to have you here, Eva. Eva from Sweden, I think. Right?
Denmark.
Sweden, yeah.
Denmark. I'm sorry. Yeah, from Denmark.
She's been with us on Clubhouse as well. Thanks for being with us.
We love it when you speak as well, Eva. So we'll invite you to one of these. Thank you for being here. So, any closing statements? We have a few minutes more.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some final words. For me, what I would say is, I think we have given a lot of pieces of information here, which are very helpful. And one more thing, I try to prioritize as well when I work within a team or with people around me is to make sure that people see the big picture, not the chunk of task, the only chunk of task that they need to take care of. But if they see the overall picture, if they know what they are doing they see the output of what they are doing, I think that is also very helpful and motivates a lot, because the accountability also sits on motivation. So I really try to make that a must whenever I'm working with somebody, or whenever I go to an organization and I do need to do some work that has something to see with accountability. So yeah, that's what I wanted to put on the table here.
Thank you, Dante.
Yeah.
Well, any final words?
I would say to have the courage to see it, what you are doing or not doing, the awareness to own it, the wisdom to solve it, and the impulse to do it. Like to
Beautiful.
be aware in the five senses.
Mhm, mhm.
Beautiful.
Thank
Yeah, like it.
Very nice.
you.
I would say that accountability is about building a better future, not trying to fix the past. So if we look at whatever has broken down in the moment, we can go back and say, why did this happen? Why shouldn't it have happened? I think the question we want to ask ourselves is, how can we be better next time? How can we learn from where things broke down, and so that we can be better and do better together? Because at the end of the day, accountability is about creating relationships that work. So I know what I can count on you for, and you know what I can count on me for, and that we can build the trust that we can build a better future together.
Like that.
Yeah, and I would add, it's ultimately, I want people to think about a time in their life or an area in their life where they're really excited to do something, and ask them, how do they behave then? Because they're almost always accountable then. If I really want to do something, I go and do it.
Great.
And it's not even a thought about will I or will I follow through or anything like that, because I want to. And that's where we want people to get to, so that this is fun. This is fun to build that future that Susan, you're talking about, right? I'm motivated to do it because that's what I want to do. I think getting clear on that and helping people to have some fun together goes a long way.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, then you're doing exciting stuff together.
Yeah.
So for me, I love that. First of all, well, Lauren was saying that she's loving the interaction between us all, and so do I. This is just such a delicious conversation to have with you, with the likes of you guys. But for me, accountability is such a scary issue for so many people. Just even the word, it sounds like it's going to be something really difficult, and I'm going to be held accountable. It's like, and it really, how can we have the right conversations, be courageous enough, everything we've talked about today, so that accountability can be edifying you, really make you step into everything you can be, which is what we talk about when we're exploring ourselves, exploring our reaction to others, exploring how they think us. Accountability goes a long way to create these sustainable relationships in the workplace and in life. So just remember, when you're found accountable for something that you can and want to do, how it feels. And I think that we could lessen the fear around accountability and start moving into it. So for me, just exploring it as I'm always becoming accountable will allow me to do that with myself and with others. So thank you for a deep conversation. I'm always left with more things I think about just as we finish.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Marcia is saying that part of accountability is saying no, and I will not be able to do that for you. We started with that, and it's such a big takeaway, right, Marcia? Thank you for being here. And so I just wanted to say that we are streaming live on Facebook and on LinkedIn. If you want to share this with somebody else, if you're looking at it recorded, you can share it on your timeline or wherever you want. And also you can come next week to see at the same time on Wednesday. We'll be streaming from here or from the Human Element website page, and on LinkedIn as well. So just hop back in if you want us to let you know. Leave us a message. We'll make sure to invite you directly to the next live sessions, but we'll be here next week and enjoying ourselves and learning more about issues that are really important to us in the workplace and in life nowadays. So thank you for chiming into this. Thank you, Ethan, Pai, Susan, Dante.
Thank
Dante
you all.
for being the
Thank you all.
initiator of all of this.
Thank you very
Having
much,
us.
Monica. Thank you,
And for being
everybody.
here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Hope
you
to see
so
you
much.
guys again
Thanks, everybody.
soon, next week.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Happy Wednesday.
Happy
Bye.
Wednesday, everyone.
Happy Wednesday.